The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Failed presidential candidate and former Massachusetts Republican Governor Mitt Romney has been traveling around the country trying to, I guess, help Republicans, although I would question really how much help he could provide to Republicans who want to get elected next week. But in any case, earlier this week, he was in Nebraska, and he went on what I can only describe as a bitter rant against President Obama. He said that this is a, quote, terrible administration, and he didn't care whether President Obama was going to get upset at him for the comments that he made. As we know, of course, Mitt Romney is completely disconnected from reality, and the things he said during this rant only further confirm that. Here's a quote. "If you're running for office and they tell you it's not a good idea to tell jokes, all right, because you always offend someone. But I'm going to tell you one about the president, and I don't care if he's offended. Look, I'm not a big fan of the president, as you may understand, but even I have been disappointed by what I've seen over the last 6 years because he promised some things but hasn't been able to deliver those things." What does that mean? Even I'm disappointed. He said, I'm no fan of the president, but even I'm disappointed. What a disjointed nonsense statement.
Maybe it means since he's so rich, he really doesn't have to worry about anything or is never disappointed with anything. But even this rich guy with no worries in the world is disappointed. He
went on to list a number of items that he is disappointed with President Obama about. Those include poverty, income inequality, the education system, and the president's promise to let people keep their existing plans under the Affordable Care Act. Even Mitt Romney doesn't care about these things. I mean, in other words, he would have eliminated the Affordable Care Act altogether. As far as education, he certainly couldn't have been taking it seriously because he once promised a girl that if he was president, every single college graduate would have a job immediately. So he clearly couldn't have been too keyed into education. Poverty has never been one of Mitt Romney's primary concerns. I mean, he said 47% of the country are just takers who are never going to be anything but takers.
He also said that he's not too concerned with poor people because there's a safety net there.
That's right. He said, I'm not really that concerned with poor people. It's an amazing, just bitter sounding rant from a guy who knows that he just wasn't able to beat President Obama in spite of what his pollsters were telling him.
Yeah, it does sound bitter. It sounds kind of a little bit like what we heard from McCain, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And Mitt Romney not really striking me yet as the angry old man yelling at kids to get off of his lawn, which John McCain did sound like quite a bit after losing in 2008. But he's definitely going in that direction. Someone who's really going in a completely bizarre and insane direction is Fox News so-called Dr. Keith Ablow. Now, if you need a reminder about Dr. Keith Ablow, he's the guy who said that the World Cup was an Obama conspiracy to distract from the real problems. He said that the Oregon school shooting was going to be reported on very incorrectly by anti-gun nuts. He said that it was data rage and mobile phones rather than guns that were responsible for the Aurora Batman theater shootings. And he also said that, quote, speaking as a psychiatrist, Joe Biden may be suffering from dementia and might have been drunk during the debate in which he embarrassingly pummeled Paul Ryan. So that's the context, right, for Dr. Keith Ablow. The latest is that he wrote an op-ed for foxnews.com where he says that we need to have an American jihad to spread our system of beliefs and government around the world. Yeah, a Christian version of Sharia law. It's amazing because we're often criticized for saying there's a movement in the U.S. among the right to push a Christian or Judeo-Christian version, as the case may be, of Sharia law all over the world and in the country. And we have Keith Ablow here saying exactly that. Here's some commentary from Fox News. They just seem to love these comments from Keith Ablow. Check it out.
Well, consider this idea, an American jihad. That's what our own Dr. Keith Ablow is calling for in his new op-ed.
He says, quote, an American jihad would embrace the correct belief that if every nation on earth were governed by freely elected leaders and by our Constitution, the world would be a far better place.
But now Dr. Keith is coming under fire for his idea. Why? Well, he joins us right now from Boston. Keith, let's start with, okay, you're calling for an American jihad. When you say jihad, what do you mean?
Well, I looked it up to make sure that I was being consistent with the spirit of the word, which is a struggle against non-believers. Those who don't believe in freedom, who don't believe in autonomy and liberty, are our natural enemies. And we need to again embrace the fact that we have manifest destiny as this country, as Americans, to not only remain American fundamentally in our own national character, but to spread our national character to other nations such that they would model ours.
Okay, well, here's the next survey.
It's funny how jihad is really, really a bad thing until Keith Ablow looks up the definition of it and then says we just need like an American version of it. All of a sudden, jihad's not looking so bad.
It's amazing. So I guess because there are people in the world forcing their beliefs on other people, we should go out into the world and force our beliefs on them to make sure that they don't force their beliefs on anybody.
I was thinking this is one of the least trustworthy doctors on TV. Of course, there's Dr. Oz, and we can't forget about Dr. Oz, but Dr. Keith Ablow is really in the running, I would say, for one of the doctors that you should be most distrustful of.
Or pretty much any doctor that appears on Fox News and starts saying things like this.
Would Keith Ablow be personally picking up, I don't know, if when you fight an American jihad, I don't know if you need guns or Bibles, probably both, some combination of them. Would Keith Ablow be picking up a gun or a Bible, or would he leave the actual fighting of this American jihad to the poor and disproportionately minority individuals that are targeted by the American military, or would he actually go himself?
I doubt he'd go himself. He'd probably reenact the draft or something, something like that. And you do need guns and Bibles, but you can hollow out the Bible
and put a gun in it.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to remember, of course, we have a long history of really successful forced conversions of other governments to our system of government. I mean, we can look at how well it went in Vietnam. We can look at how well it went in Iraq. We can look at how well it went in Afghanistan. We can look at how well it went when the U.S. exerted our influence in Central and South American nations. There's no reason at all to think, Lewis, that it might not work that well to forcibly convert other governments to a system like ours.
No, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing to do with no risks at all.
Apple CEO Tim Cook came out officially, publicly recognizing that he is a gay man. Now, here's the thing. Many people responded to this by saying, yeah, we kind of knew that Apple CEO Tim Cook was gay, and we've known this for a while. However, not all of the bigots knew this, and I'll get to some of their comments in a second. He wrote, "Let me be clear, I'm proud to be gay, and I consider being gay among the greatest gifts God has given me." He wrote this in a Bloomberg Businessweek column. He said, "I don't consider myself an activist, but I realize how much I've benefited from the sacrifice of others. So if hearing that the CEO of Apple is gay can help someone struggling to come to terms with who he or she is, or bring comfort to anyone who feels alone, or inspire people to insist on their equality, then it's worth the trade-off with my own privacy." The reaction, Lewis, on Twitter, on blogs, on the internet, has been incredibly homophobic. Quote, "Tim Cook is now a legit Mac fag." Quote, "Tim Cook has officially announced that he's gay. For those who don't know who's this fag, well, you can Google him." Quote, "Apple CEO Tim Cook announces he's gay. This is breaking news. A fag is breaking news." Quote, "Tim Cook is a fag? Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave right now." And, quote, "Tim Cook, hope you die, you fag bitch." Lewis, no surprise, really.
No, not really. I didn't really know anything about Tim Cook other than what his position was. I mean, it's really not that interesting, but of course, people's response is what should be highlighted here.
It is, and the next layer and the response is what I want to think about is: are we going to see a boycott of Apple because the CEO is gay? And if we did, would these bigots not realize that there's gay people working at all levels of whatever electronics company you're going to choose? The idea of boycotting Apple because of this is not only just flat out homophobic, bigoted, and retrograde, but it's also really dumb because what, you think you're going to find a company that makes electronics at this scale that has a no gay people policy? Is that really what you're looking for?
Maybe that's what they're looking for, or as long as they don't know. It's kind of like don't ask, don't tell, right? If they don't know that anyone at Samsung is gay, they can say, hey, I'll just buy a Samsung phone. But even a boycott from bigots would pretty much have no impact on Apple.
Speaking of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we'll talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell today with the first openly gay Navy SEAL, Brent Jones, in our interview. That's coming up later. We, of course, have been talking with you about the Ottawa shootings that took place in Canada. And in reaction to this, Matthew Hagee on the Hagee hotline, son of Pastor John Hagee, again suggested that now it's the Ottawa shootings that are a sign of the end times. Now, I want to remind you, the Navy Yard shooting, which was a couple years ago now, was a sign of the end times and of Jesus' imminent return, according to Matthew Hagee. John Hagee said that the crisis in Ukraine is the beginning of the last days. Matthew Hagee said that Ebola is a sign of the end times. Time and time again, whatever happens is a sign of the end times. And now here's Matthew Hagee saying it's the Ottawa shooting that is a sign of the end times.
Sheila also asked this question as we called upon her and her family to see if they were okay. She said that Ottawa is not a very big city, and it's full of friendly people, and many of them are Christians and attend church. Does this terror attack tie into end times? Well, Sheila, the answer to your question is absolutely. Jesus Christ gave the spinal column of prophecy in the book of Matthew. And in that, he said, you will hear of wars and you will hear of rumors of wars. Right now, what we see happening here in North America is the rumor of a war. People are suggesting that maybe we are at war with terror. The reality of it is, terrorism has declared war on America. And
first of all, this whole thing about Jesus predicted the end times would come after there is war and the threat of war. When hasn't there been war or the threat of war in the history of humanity?
I'm pretty sure there has been some type of conflict at any given time throughout our history.
And then the next question is, how many signs do we need before the actual end times happen? Because we have years and years of supposed signs from Matthew Hagee that the end times are going to happen. The part that sickens me the most about guys like this is it really seems, Lewis, like they get off on the idea of the rapture and the killing of billions of people.
I think a lot of the people who listen to them do. I think Hagee may be someone who doesn't really believe all of the nonsense he says.
Now, why do you think that? Why would you pick him out as a guy who doesn't really buy into the nonsense?
Just when I hear him talk, I don't think he believes it. I think he just likes the money.
But he's been the son of an incredible indoctrinator extremist his entire life. Although it's possible that maybe his dad also is thinking of this as just a business and has told his son, hey, listen, this is nonsense, but it's how we make money.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Just something in his tone I think I'm picking up on, but I could be wrong.
Make sure to follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman, and give us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. We have a great program planned for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program, which is our primary source of funding, is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com is your best source for unbiased news because spending $1 trillion on war is freedom and liberty, but we just don't have the money for that liberal big bird. If that sounds unbiased to you, you will love liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Paul Hyatt. Paul Hyatt, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join at davidpakman.com/membership. And later today, I will preview the David Pakman Show Hatriot Mail calendar and tell you about what we have coming up as far as that goes. Today's recommendation is a documentary recommendation. The name of the film is The City Dark. It's a film by Ian Chaney, and it focuses mostly on light pollution. It won a number of different awards. It has some great guests, including Carl Sagan's widow, Neil deGrasse Tyson, other astrophysicists and astronomers. It's really excellent. And especially for those of us who live in cities, you may not be aware about light pollution. And even if you are, you may not be aware of how recently light has become, artificial light has become such an important day-to-day convention or norm in human life. And the film really goes into that. Now, I do want to warn people, later on in the film, it does get into some of what I would consider pseudo-scientific claims and speculation regarding the impact of artificial light. I'm not endorsing those. I haven't independently looked into the claims that it makes. So just a little bit of a disclaimer. But the broader topic, Lewis, that of light pollution and artificial light in human society, is a super interesting topic.
It is interesting. And, living in a place like you've got to be in one of the most light polluted places in the world right now.
Yeah, one of the guys in the band I'm in has a really nice telescope, and he talks about driving 2 hours outside of the city to really be able to use it and to be able to see stuff.
Yeah, that is crazy. And it's unfortunate that we're depriving ourselves of such a nice view.
Yes, no question about it. So I recommend it. It is called The City Dark. It's on Netflix. It is elsewhere online. If you watch it, take a look. Let me know what you think. I found it super interesting. It's not particularly long, but it's really, really well put together. I have a story here that is the perfect storm of so many controversial issues. This is a story about guns. This is a story about ISIS. This is a story about pit bull dogs. It's a story about rape. And it's a story about animal cruelty. A 22-year-old Connecticut man was taken into custody this week after an incident in Waterbury, Connecticut, where he was allegedly found raping a woman's pit bull in her backyard. The dog's owner, Alice Woodruff, allegedly found a completely naked man sexually assaulting her dog in the morning. Woodruff told the news station that her dog, which she described as an aggressive rescue dog, kept tied to an 800-pound towing chain, was surprisingly calm during the incident. She said he pranced through the yard naked, yelling, "This is our day, and you have to prosper in it. ISIS sent me." I was thinking, did something just land in my backyard? I ran in, got my gun out of the bedroom, and fired a warning shot into the ground. But the man, who was apparently unaffected by the gunshot, started walking towards her, allegedly yelling about the end of the world and saying that he gave her dog Ebola. So actually, this is also an Ebola story, Lewis. Have you ever heard anything so insane that so perfectly combines 6 or 7 controversial news narratives that exist?
It is interesting in that regard. We've heard some crazy stories about people running naked into someone else's home and defecating all over the place and things like that.
Even Dennis Rodman doing it in North Korea.
Yeah, this really does tie in everything we've been talking about recently in a pretty incredible way.
The latest update is that the woman is not going to be facing any gun charges based on that warning shot that she fired, given the circumstances. Just a lot of stuff going on here that is crazy. Of course, having this dog, I mean, presumably it has to be tied up to this chain because it was a rescue that was incredibly aggressive. But at the same time, we know that most of the dogs who are involved in these biting incidents that we hear about are dogs that are tied to chains all day. So that is a little bit of a concern. Of course, the concern about this guy's motivations. Nobody actually believes that the guy has Ebola or is in any way connected to ISIS, right?
No, I think we all understand that this man is probably quite mentally ill and should be locked up somewhere.
I don't know what the exact prescription would be for this individual, but just what a bizarre and insane story. Do you disagree, Lewis, with the woman not facing charges for the gun, or are you okay with the warning shot that was fired here?
Warning shots are great. I wish more people would use them.
But not firing them into the air, I assume.
If you fire it straight up into the air, you're fine, assuming there's assuming you're outside.
Lewis,
that's okay.
That's ridiculous. If you think about how far up the bullet goes, if you have even a slight wind, it's not going to land in the same spot. And the bullet does come down with some significant force. I do not endorse firing these into the air.
You're wrong. The terminal velocity of that bullet is harmless if you shoot it straight up into the air. It's only when you shoot at angles where it travels that it can hurt people.
What if there's wind, though? We did the report on this.
No. You need to look this up. It doesn't matter what the wind is. If you shoot a bullet straight into the air, it will come down and it won't really do any damage.
So you endorse firing straight into the air?
Fire either straight up or straight down. That's how you fire a warning shot. Do not shoot in any other direction for any other reason.
On the bonus show today, Lewis's 4 incidents of firing warning shots straight into the air. He will tell us exactly how those situations resolve themselves. Going from pitbull rape to Skype rape. This is a strange story that I don't even fully understand, Lewis. 76-year-old Billy Joe Turnage is the Union County, Georgia Republican Party chairman, a Republican official, okay? He was just arrested after he was allegedly broadcast live on Skype sexually assaulting and attempting to rape a woman. Police say they received a call about an ongoing assault and rape of a 39-year-old woman at the home of Billy Joe Turnage. Quote from the police, October 22nd, dispatch received a 911 call at approximately 4 p.m. of what was believed to be an assault and rape. It was being viewed via Skype. Deputies responded, and I responded as well. The charges are sexual battery and criminal attempt to commit rape. Here's what I don't understand. Skype connections are typically two-way, or it's a conference call with multiple people. But I don't even know what it means that there was a broadcast and that someone was able to just observe that there was a rape going on. And I've read 5 or 6 articles about the story, and none of them explains what the logistics are of this rape broadcast on Skype.
Yeah, so there was clearly, I mean, Skype is just a two-way. I mean, you can have more people on Skype, but clearly there's a conversation going on. There's the video component.
Yeah.
And on one end of that, someone was witnessing what was happening on the other end, which I guess was this attempted rape.
And the other thing that also doesn't make sense is if this was indeed visible on video, why did they need what's being called a 2-day investigation before Billy Joe was arrested? If you have the video evidence, you'd think you'd be able to do the arrest more quickly than in 2 days.
Well, that's assuming it was recorded. It might not have been. It could have just been a conversation where no one is recording the screen.
I see what you're saying. So it was broadcast, kind of, it goes out into the tubes, but then it just evaporates, so to speak.
Exactly.
The other question here is whether this would be a so-called legitimate rape attempt, according to Republican Todd Akin, or not. Hopefully we'll hear more about that. But Republican official, also 76-year-old Republican official, allegedly broadcasting his attempted rape of a 39-year-old via Skype. It's getting real strange, Lewis.
This is another very bizarre story. Today is quite a day.
Next, we will speak to the first openly gay Navy SEAL, Brett Jones. That's next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Brett Jones, who's a former Navy SEAL currently living in Alabama, where he and his husband run a business together. Brett, I've been really researching and reading about your story over the last couple days, getting ready for our interview, and there's so many interesting elements to it. Let's maybe start at when you first had the idea that you might want to get into the military.
Okay.
So tell us about that.
Well, I remember I was living in Egypt at the time, and I overheard a conversation between my father and my brother. And my father at the time was a colonel in the Air Force, and he was an ambassador's aide there at the embassy in Cairo. And he came back and told the story about how he wasn't even allowed to see these guys called Navy SEALs. And, you know, at the time, he really didn't know a whole lot about them. He had heard of them in Vietnam, and for some reason that planted a seed in me that it was just neat that, you know, even my dad wasn't allowed to see them or know who they were.
And what year did you finally join up?
I joined the Navy in 1993.
And then what was the path from joining the Navy until you were ultimately part of the Navy SEALs?
Well, it was a path kind of riddled with a lot of obstacles. I joined the Navy, went through boot camp, and then my A school, and then from there I went to BUDS, which is the precursor for SEAL training. And I didn't make it through my first time. I went to Iceland as a Navy policeman, did that for a while, and worked really hard to be able to get the opportunity to try to become a SEAL again. And the second time I went through, I made it, and that was pretty much the path to to get me. Obviously, you get to your SEAL team, and you still have about 6 months worth of training and advanced training to do before you become a SEAL. But that initial 6 months of buzz training is the toughest.
So in the background of all this, of course, there's your sexuality, and you of course had to have been aware of what the policy was in the military back in 1993. What impact, or how did that kind of interface with your desires to be in the military? Is that something you thought about?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it. When I joined, they had the don't ask, don't tell policy was sort of new.
Yeah.
And I knew instinctively at the time that it was kind of a load of crap. So I just knew going in that I was going to have to do a lot of lying.
And is that what it was? Was it, some people talk about their experience in the military under don't ask, don't tell as being more, I guess, don't ask, don't tell, in the sense that they didn't directly feel that they had to lie. They kind of felt out of place when there may have been conversations where they may not necessarily have felt included based on their sexuality, but that direct lying wasn't really a part of it. But for you, it was.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. See, the thing is the SEAL team community is a very tight-knit community. There's not very many of us, and so you spend a lot of time in that very small environment. It gets very difficult to keep a lie like that or a secret like that from the guys you work with.
And what kinds of situations would there be where you just had to just lie?
Well, I remember a lot of the guys kept asking me, about any girlfriends or anything like that. And I remember it got so bad that at one point a friend of mine actually posed as my girlfriend to a couple of the get-togethers that we had in the SEAL teams.
So this wasn't in pictures. This was, she actually would show up places with you.
Yeah. It was like a comedy. It was, well, probably a comedy of errors more than anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can understand why there's this kind of funny element of it looking back, but at the time, was that difficult for you?
It was. Obviously, just like anybody, you don't want to, especially to those guys that, we were so close, we were like brothers. Yeah. And, lying to them it was a terrible thing. It made me feel really bad that I would ever do that to them. And
I'm guessing it wouldn't have been necessarily your choice, right? I mean, did you feel that this is just the way it had to be because of the policy?
Oh, it definitely had to be that way. The don't ask, don't tell policy. It was a don't get caught policy is all it really was. It was a nightmare. It was a mess.
Were you out to your family at the time that you joined the Navy?
I was.
And what was that experience like? In other words, was that is that something that you did right away, or what was the timeline of that like?
I came out. I was sort of outed. My mom overheard a phone call that I had with a friend of mine who was gay when I was, I believe, 17. I was fairly young, and it didn't go well. Like I said, my father was a colonel in the Air Force, and they were very religious, so they felt very strongly against it. And it wasn't a very good coming out. In fact, I got kicked out of my house.
And then ultimately, were you allowed back in? What was that period of time like?
It was tough. It was probably one of the most toughest times of my life. There was a lot of heavy thinking after I got kicked out of the house, and I did eventually move back in with my parents just prior to me joining the Navy, but it was tough. I learned a lot though. It wasn't all bad. I think in any situation where bad things sort of happen to a person, you kind of grow and learn from it and become a little bit stronger.
Now, since your dad was in the Air Force, he, of course, must have also been aware of what the policy was. So were there conversations with him about your potential risk situation?
I honestly don't recall a specific conversation. I think it was something more that we just didn't talk about. In fact, after that, getting kicked out of the house, we didn't we didn't talk about my sexuality for years.
And when you, before leaving the Navy SEALs, had you come out?
Yeah, I was forced out of the closet. Let's see, that was 2001, or no, I'm sorry, yeah, 2002 rather. I just got back from doing a 6-month deployment. We deployed 2 weeks after 9/11, and I got back, and the person I was living with at the time, I was in a relationship with, had this big party for me for, coming back and, being healthy and, all that. And I drank a little bit at that party. And then the next day, I woke up and I had realized that before I went to bed that I probably didn't spend as much time with him as I should have. Instead, talking with other, people at the party. And I called his office and left a message on the machine, and one of the people that worked for him heard that message, and it was somebody that he had recently just counseled. So she reported it, and that was all it took for the Navy to launch a full-scale investigation.
So there was so quite literally there was an investigation into your sexual orientation by the Navy.
Yeah, yep. It lasted for months, actually.
And it's amazing to me, how could it last for months when it seems like it's all about asking you, as absurd as it is, what's your sexual orientation and getting an answer? In other words, why did they need to, what was being investigated?
So the don't ask, don't tell policy is just that. It's don't ask, don't tell. So, they're trying to figure out ways to get me to tell. I remember, right when I came back off of the deployment, I met with the investigator and, I went to a free fall school, and then I came back from that, and that's when I found out about the investigation. And, it was an interrogation. It was about 2 hours of her trying any which way she could to get me to say that I was gay. Fortunately, I got put in touch with the SLDN up in D.C. Just prior to that. So they prepared me for the questions that they were going to ask me and the tactics that they were going to use.
Can you give us an example of what types of questions they would ask to try to get you to say something?
So they had done their research. They found that we had bought a house together and that both our names were on the house. And so they would say stuff like that. And somehow they were able to find out about a vacation that we'd even gone on. And, asked, different questions, like, why would you buy a house with, this guy? Or why would you buy plane tickets to travel together to this place? Or, it was stuff like that. And
how would you answer those questions?
I told them that by the direction of the lawyer, I said, I don't feel comfortable with that question, and I need to discuss that with my legal counsel.
Looking back at all of this now, I mean, what's your view on it? What's your view on don't ask, don't tell having been repealed? I mean, to me, it seems like just almost an immoral waste of resources that could be put into so many other things.
Looking back on it, it's honestly, it's a really sad part of our history, but I'm actually glad that it's history now.
Yeah.
But it's really sad. I remember going to gay bars or whatever while I was in the Navy, and I could just see, somebody that had been, kicked out of the Navy for it. This is the thing, is getting kicked out of the Navy. I mean, they would try to dishonorably discharge you, which is like being a convicted felon in a lot of states. And so you could just see the shame on some of these people's faces that you talk to and you hear their story, and it was horrible. And it really is a black eye in our history, I think, just because there were so many people. I believe, like an average of 300 a year in the Navy alone were kicked out under the don't ask, don't tell policy for being gay or lesbian or transgender or whatever. And it was... it's sad because these are people who really just wanted to serve their country.
Of course. We've been speaking with Brett Jones. The name of the book is Pride, the story of the first openly gay Navy SEAL. It's from Dog-Eared Publishing. Brett, really a pleasure having you on. Thanks for telling us your story.
Thanks for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Here's a pretty despicable story out of Wisconsin. A Green Bay alderman has now apologized to a Muslim woman who is a resident in Green Bay for responding to her inquiry about public bus service by questioning her political beliefs and asking essentially if she's a Muslim extremist and whether she condemns Islamic terrorism. This is Alderman Chris Wary, and he directed his questions to Hiba Muhammad after the recent University of Wisconsin Green Bay graduate, this is a college graduate who lives in the United States, emailed him and said, you know, we should really have free bus service on election day. That way people who don't have private transportation can get to the voting booth without paying. Perfectly reasonable request. Wary wrote back and he agreed to check into that, but he said, I just want to be assured that your group, the Muslim Student Association, in no way promotes or defends militant Islamic ideology. Muhammad refused to answer, posted the entire exchange to Facebook, and the veteran city council member, Wary, has now said, you know, it was probably the wrong thing. I phrased it wrong. It was the wrong setting, and I apologize for that. This is so funny, Louis. I love that. It was wrong to ask whether she denounced terror groups based merely on her religion in response to a question about bus service. It would have been a perfectly fine question to randomly ask someone merely because they're Muslim in a different context.
Yeah, that's not really an apology or an appropriate response to this. But yeah, whatever. Clearly, this guy is harboring some resentment towards his Muslim people.
Can you imagine getting an email as a politician from, Ezekiel Levy or whatever, some Jewish guy who writes in about the price of school lunch for his kids and saying, I'd be glad to look into that, Mr. Levy, as long as you can first confirm to me that you don't support Orthodox Jewish orogenital suction when conducting circumcision. As long as you can clear that up, I'll look into the price of school lunches for you.
Yeah, or asking a Christian when they ask you about vending machines in the school if they condone crucifying Jewish carpenters. You know?
Right, yeah, or stoning women who can't prove their virginity on the night of their wedding to death. This is just insane, ladies and gentlemen. What are we doing? And he said, Alderman Chris Wary has said, in spite of the controversy, he will not step down, in case you were wondering. All right, let's talk about the upcoming Hatriot Mail calendar situation. I mentioned this yesterday, and I got so many emails about it. I really hope, I'm going to talk more about the calendar in a second, and these will go on sale next week. I really want to ask our audience, if you're not currently a David Pakman Show member, please seriously think about using this opportunity to get a free calendar with your membership that we're going to have to do it, because we actually have a pretty tough couple of months coming up in November and December, and I'll explain why. In any membership-driven, anytime you're dealing with subscriptions and memberships, you have something called a churn rate, right? Which is the difference between your rate of new subscribers and people who are canceling or unsubscribing. And like with anything else, sometimes people just move away from watching political shows. Sometimes, unfortunately, too often, people forget that the credit or debit card they're using to pay for their David Pakman Show membership has expired, and their email has changed, and we have no way of letting them know that. So there's a constant kind of drop off of members, and the idea is the influx exceeds the outflow, and in the net, we get more and more members over time. Now, the reason November and December are going to be really tough is that we do the best around presidential elections, right? And that's when we have the biggest inflow of new members. So we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the 2012 presidential election. In November and December of 2012, we had a huge influx of new members. Most of those renewed or maintained their memberships in November and December of 2013. Unfortunately, we now know, based on what we've seen in terms of expired memberships and people saying, you know, I'm just not really following politics anymore, we know that we're going to take a pretty significant hit in November and December. So I'm hoping that the impact, the excitement around the 2015 Hatriot Mail calendar in November and December will counteract what we know is going to be a drop-off in membership. And to tell you in no uncertain terms, It's because of membership that the show exists. It's because of membership that we're now at 5 days a week when we started at once every other week years and years ago. So I don't need to overstate. I can't possibly overstate the importance of membership. So let's talk about the calendar. This is the 2015 Hatriot Mail calendar. The cover was designed by a David Pakman Show viewer. Each of the 12 months has a different, unique, custom Hatriot Mail or David Pakman Show related image. 11 of those have come from viewers, and one was actually designed by producer Louis Motamedi. Louis, I know you're very excited about your work being published.
I am thrilled. I hope it really launches my my art career.
Yes, no, I know that you're very, very much into that. We have a couple of different options that will all be announced next week, and these will be available to everybody. If you just want the calendar, you can just get a calendar, okay? That's what it's going to be. We will ship it to you, no big deal. If you want the calendar signed by both Louis and by me, that will be available. We're just adding on the cost of having to ship it twice in order to get these signed for you. That's if you just want the calendar. We're also going to offer year memberships at the regular rate of $60 with a free calendar. The calendar alone is going to be going for $25 unsigned, $35 signed. For $60, you get the calendar and a yearly membership for what it normally would cost just for the membership. And if you want the membership with the calendar signed, it's going to be $10 more. So those are going to be the four options. We're going to get these shipped out as quickly as possible. The signed ones are obviously going to take a little longer since they need to be shipped twice. But I can't tell you how excited we are about this. The feedback has been amazing so far to the posts and the mentions of the calendar that we've done. This all starts next week, and we will have more details and tell you exactly how to do this. But Louis, very, very exciting stuff.
It is. This is probably the coolest product we've had so far.
I'd say so, because it's a one-time thing. The t-shirts are cool and people love the t-shirts and the hoodies and the bumper stickers, but this is a 2015 calendar that is only obviously going to be offered during these upcoming membership specials. So that's it for today as far as the calendar goes. Next week, I'll give you more information about it. Any voicemails for questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, or trolling, 219-2DavidP is our voicemail number. Here's a voicemail we received.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey. I am a ER nurse in New York City, and I really like your show. I just wanted to bring up one point that I thought was interesting. As you all know, the flu vaccine, many people are afraid to get it for whatever reason that they choose.
Yeah.
But I wonder if an Ebola vaccine were to become available tomorrow, would people be interested in getting it? What would the response be by the public, even if there's very little threat for the public being infected by Ebola? I really wonder how that vaccine, what the kind of reception for that vaccine would be.
This is interesting, Louis, because we have, if you imagine a Venn diagram, people who are overly panicked about Ebola. And next to that, we have the anti-vaccine movement. And presumably there would be some overlap of people who are both incredibly panicked about Ebola and anti-vaccine. So if there were to be an Ebola vaccine, based on both their overstatement of the risk of contracting Ebola, but their opposition to vaccines, what would they do in that situation? I don't really have the answer.
Yeah, that would be an interesting situation. I suppose if what's happening is the vaccine is being offered at birth or, to everyone as a preventive thing, they might, be more inclined to say no, thank you. But if it becomes widespread and it becomes essential, they'd probably be more likely to take it.
It would be amazing to me to imagine someone being against the flu vaccine but wanting an Ebola vaccine, just given the disproportionately higher probability that you would get the flu, bearing in mind that the probability that the flu would kill you is, of course, lower than that of Ebola. It would present a pretty interesting conundrum, I think, for a lot of people. Send me your thoughts on that. On today's bonus show, we will talk about Kim Jong-un's recent surgery. We will hear from a North Korean escapee. We'll talk about a California Highway Patrol officer accused of stealing pictures of women in bikinis off of phones. And the Pentagon reveals a record-breaking computer processing circuit. We will talk about all of that and more on today's bonus show. You can get the bonus show by going to davidpakman.com/membership. Get the bonus show, get all of the member benefits. Absolutely fantastic bonus show today. Lewis is the host, and I'm the sidekick. We'll speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.